Okay, let's unpack the story of an animal that spent thousands of years as, well, a living legend, only to disappear from the wild in this sort of fog of human conflict and really uncertain dates. The Barbary lion,
Hmm.
sometimes called the Atlas lion or the North African lion, this subspecies was, like the undisputed king of the Maghreb Mountains. We've gathered sources detailing its unique biology, its really dramatic historical reverence, from the sands of the Roman Colosseum all the way to the moats of medieval Europe, and the incredibly confusing, honestly frustrating timeline of its final days in the wild. So our mission today is to try and figure out exactly how this animal, so admired by humanity for so long, ended up hunted to extinction in its native habitat. And maybe more importantly, is there any genuine, like genetically pure lineage that still exists today? Is it holding on to some kind of tenuous thread of survival?
What's fascinating here is framing the Barbary lion properly. It wasn't just a lion, right? It was distinct enough to be considered, well, a unique subspecies of the African lion we know today. Its loss is particularly significant because it represents a complete erasure, pretty much, of a regional population adapted to a very specific northern kind of ecology. Its former range was huge across Northwest Africa, essentially spanning from the high peaks of the Atlas Mountains right down to the Mediterranean coastlines. And, that's what defined it. Its extraordinary adaptability. It thrived in mountain forests, rugged lowlands, and even those semi-arid regions kind of bumping up against the Sahara Desert.
And the name Barbary itself ties it directly to the human history of that landscape, doesn't it?
Precisely, yeah. It comes from the historical Maghreb region, named after the Berbers, who are the area's oldest known inhabitants. It gives you an immediate sense of this deep shared history. This lion wasn't like a newcomer to the region. It was completely interwoven with the identity of the people there for millennia.
Okay, here's where we turn to its look, its visual signature. When you picture a typical African lion, you think short, tawny fur, built for the heat of the plains, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Barbary lion, though, according to these 19th century hunter accounts, was described as this magnificent, almost impossibly large beast. Larger than life.
Well, while modern analysis of skeletons suggests their actual physical size was probably comparable to the largest of today's African lions, the overwhelming feature, the thing that really made them stand out, was the mane.
Right.
Specifically, its remarkable thermal adaptation.
Right. It wasn't just some modest collar of hair. The Barbary male sported what the sources describe as a truly luxurious, thick, often dark mane that didn't just stop at the neck.
No, it kept going.
It extended down over the shoulders, sometimes to the elbows, and often wrapped right around the belly. It was like this extravagant, furry cape.
And that coat, that extra floof, was a necessity, really, not a luxury. Barbary lions lived in the cold, often snowy mountain climates of the Maghreb. This required a massive adaptation away from the heat-optimized structure of their sub-Saharan cousins. That extra hair was absolutely crucial for insulation, for surviving those harsh, high-altitude temperatures.
Their sheer magnificence, I suppose, meant that they were objects of human obsession and capture for thousands of years. They had this entire second life outside of the Atlas Mountains, particularly back in antiquity and the Middle Ages.
Absolutely. They were highly prized. Sources confirm they famously fought gladiators in the Roman Colosseum. Rome often stocked the arenas with North African lions because, well, they were relatively close and had this reputation for ferocity.
Makes sense.
And they also became staple menagerie captives throughout medieval Europe. Kings and nobles wanted them. We even have concrete archaeological proof of this connection right in Britain. Carbon dating, performed on 2 Barbary lion skulls found in the Tower of London's Old Moat, revealed a fascinating timeline. The older skull, belonging to a royal captive, died somewhere between 1280 and 1385.
Wow, the 13th to 14th century.
Yeah. That means a Barbary lion in captivity in London represents the oldest known lion from the British Isles since the actual extinction of the native cave lion, which was, 12,000 years ago?
That spans centuries of European history then, connecting power structures, royalty, directly to this specific animal. But I guess all that historical reverence, in the end, it couldn't protect them once human expansion really started to surge. By the 19th century, the sources clearly show the Barbary lions were facing immense pressure. They were widespread earlier, yes, but as settlements moved into the lowlands, the lions really had nowhere to go but up, literally ran for the hills, retreated. They retreated into the remotest mountain strongholds, and this forced a fundamental shift in how they lived, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The key behavioral changes observed were, immediate survival tactics. They started relying heavily on hunting livestock, which of course just increased conflict with humans.
Naturally.
They became far more nocturnal to avoid detection. But Perhaps the most profound change, the most telling one, was the shift in their social dynamic. They moved away from the large prides we think of as iconic for sub-Saharan Africa, adopting smaller groups, maybe just pairs, or increasingly as time went on, total solitude. By the 1920s, seeing a lone lion was apparently the norm.
This raises such a critical point, and one that kind of challenges our basic assumptions about lion behavior. Was this new solitary existence purely an adaptation, like a way to survive efficiently in these fragmented, resource-scarce habitats? Or was it simply a symptom of a population already collapsing, where the lions literally couldn't find others to form a pride?
That's the core question, isn't it? Solitude is incredibly costly for a big social predator like a lion. A lion hunting alone is less successful, far more vulnerable to injury or failure. A lioness raising cubs alone. That sacrifices safety and requires so much more effort.
Yeah, huge risk.
The shift suggests immense environmental stress, a point where the cost of maintaining a pride, which needs large, contiguous territories, was actually greater than the risk of being alone. It means the very core of their social structure, perhaps the most defining biological trait, was fundamentally compromised by human encroachment.
And what's so troubling is that we see the echoes of this same stress today in living lion populations.
Absolutely. This exact change, this move towards solitary existence, has also been observed in today's sub-Saharan African lions that live near human-dominated areas. It confirms that intense human presence doesn't just reduce numbers, it actually changes who the animal is behaviorally. They adapt or they die, and for the Barbary lion, adaptation meant abandoning their core social model.
So given how admired they were and how relatively recently they disappeared, you'd think we'd have a definitive date of extinction,
Huh?
like a clear marker. But instead, we run straight into this really frustrating ambiguity. The timeline of their end is just wildly conflicting, which I suppose underscores the instability of the region at that time. We have reports that are literally decades apart. The last visual record, a confirmed photograph, was taken from a plane flying the Casablanca-Dakar air route back in 1925. So, okay, that gives us a concrete marker.
Their starting point, yeah.
But then the reports just keep going for years.
They do, and it gets really murky. The last verified killing of a Barbary lion, according to records, occurred on the Tizi and Titicaca Pass in Morocco's High Atlas Mountains. That was in 1942.
Okay, 1942, much later.
Much later. But even that isn't necessarily the final word. We have accounts, maybe less verified, it's still persistent, of a later sighting in an Algerian forest north of Sétif as late as 1956.
Wow, 56. And then there's the darkest theory, the one that ties the final end of the subspecies to a tragic human conflict. It suggests the last few were lost with the destruction of that exact same forest in 1958 during the French-Algerian War.
The records are conflicting largely because this extinction was happening in these very remote, often politically volatile regions without any kind of centralized ecological tracking like we might have today. But researchers have tried to impose some clarity. There was a recent study that used a statistical model looking at the dates of their last confirmed sightings and factoring in their average lifespan.
Right, trying to extrapolate.
Exactly. And that data suggested they could have, theoretically, persisted in the absolute most remote, inaccessible areas until the mid-1960s.
The thought that they might have held on for another, 2 decades almost? In secret. It's both kind of hopeful and just heartbreaking at the same time.
It is. But ultimately, without hard evidence, a body, a definitive genetic sample, a clearer photograph, we will probably never know the exact year. The Barbary lion just sort of faded out under this cloud of uncertainty, a silent extinction that contrasts so sharply with the thousands of years they spent right at the center of human attention.
But the story doesn't quite end with absolute extinction, thankfully. The current official status of the Barbary lion is extinct in the wild, which gives us that essential glimmer of hope. And that's all thanks to captive populations.
Right. For centuries, the menageries of the Moroccan kings and sultans acquired lions, apparently directly from Berber tribes in the Atlas Mountains. These captives became known as the royal lions.
And this is where the modern conservation challenge truly begins. A few dozen of these lions, descendants of those royal captives, are still maintained in zoos today, mainly across Morocco, Israel, and Europe. And they continue to breed. Cubs are still being born.
But the absolute key is determining their genetic purity. Are they genuine, unadulterated Barbary descendants, or have they been mixed over the years? Conservation geneticists are facing this immense task, figuring out if these lions were interbred, mixed with common sub-Saharan lions over generations in captivity. They're using advanced genetic markers now to detect what's called admixture, basically genetic mixing.
So how do they actually test for that genetic dilution? What specifically are they looking for in the DNA?
Well, they look at two main types of DNA. They analyze mitochondrial DNA first, which is inherited only through the mother. This tracks the maternal line and can pretty quickly confirm if there's North African ancestry there.
Okay, that's a start.
But the real challenge is the nuclear DNA, which contains the full genetic code from both parents. In that, they're searching for specific, unique genetic markers, little bits of code, that would confirm the Barbary lion was indeed a geographically isolated population for a long time. If they find markers common to, say, Western or Eastern African lions mixed in, that confirms hybridization occurred at some point. The goal is to find the animals with the lowest possible genetic link to any sub-Saharan populations, the purest ones, essentially.
That sounds incredibly complex. And even if they do find a genetically pure strain or something close to it, the challenge of reintroduction back into the wild seems, well, enormous.
It is. You could argue it's almost impossible if we look realistically at the situation now based on the source material. So much of their native habitat in the Maghreb has been permanently destroyed, or it's highly fragmented, or it's just densely populated by humans now. Where would you even put a pride of large carnivores that are biologically adapted to hunting in cold, rugged mountains? There are very few places left, if any, that can support their original behavioral profile and the sheer amount of territory they'd need.
Yeah, the world has changed too much.
Exactly. And this is why the Barbary lion serves as such a stark warning. If we connect its historical fate to the bigger picture, the status of today's African lions across the continent is precarious. The very same pressures that killed the Barbary lion habitat loss, conflict with humans, and pressure that forces behavioral change, those are now crushing the sub-Saharan populations.
The number is truly alarming when you see it. Sources state that sub-Saharan lion populations have decreased by a staggering 43% in just the past 20 years alone. 43%.
Devastating. And that decline is driven by the exact same factors that led to the Barbary lion's solitary retreat and eventual demise. Habitat loss as we expand, increasing human-wildlife conflict as we inevitably settle in their territory, and poaching. We are literally watching history repeat itself in real time, just on a larger continental scale.
So the story of the Barbary lion really is one of a unique, mountain-adapted subspecies, revered in human history for so long, but ultimately forced into solitude and major behavioral change by our expansion. Its extinction timeline remains shrouded in uncertainty. We absolutely have to learn the central historical lesson here. The fate of the African lion today rests entirely on our ability to manage our own footprint, not just try to manage theirs.
And the sources reveal something profound, I think. The mere presence of humans, our expansion, fundamentally altered the core social structure of the Barbary lion. It forced a deeply social animal into a life of isolation simply to survive. This really challenges that common assumption that animal behavior is purely instinctual, fixed, and resistant to outside pressure. Behavior is, in fact, incredibly flexible, incredibly negotiable when survival is truly on the line. So maybe consider this provocative question as we wrap up. What other major species living today, even those we don't currently consider endangered, might already be silently changing their fundamental core social structures right now in response to our constant daily presence? Are they being pushed away from their natural ways of life in ways we don't even see yet? And what are the long-term, maybe invisible genetic and social costs of these ongoing adaptations that we might not notice until it's, well, potentially too late?